What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Hulu's 9 Perfect Strangers. We're talking episode 7, which was titled Wheels on the Bus, an episode in which we see everyone's wheels is going off of the bus, and we're breaking it all down here in this spoiler review. But before we do so, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert from when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler review, we'll make sure to like and share this review. It helps out the channel so much, but I also really appreciate the support. And in those comments, let's talk about this 7th episode. This is the second to last episode. We get some pretty big reveals in regards to Carmel looking like Method Man taking out Marsha many years ago, and obviously I assume she's the one that's been texting her this whole time. But let's talk about the Marconis and going on this psychedelic trip with Marsha and everything in between. Let me know your pros, your cons, and your thoughts and theories about what you hope to see in next week's finale in the comments below. So just quick initial thoughts before I dive into this episode and break it all down. Man, this goes back to, if you all remember, if you've been following all my reviews, the first half of this show has been really, to me, was really kind of poor writing. The pacing wasn't there. It wasn't all that intriguing, but then it hit a little bit of a run. The last 3 episodes have been pretty solid, but this 7th episode kind of goes back in that vein of how I felt in the first half of the show, where it's just they feel like incomplete scenes, characters interrupting one another, and it's just we're one more episode, and I feel like this show is just kind of petering out in regards to just a pretty unsatisfying conclusion. But hey, we haven't gotten the finale. I'm just basing it off of the second to last episode. I'm not really the biggest fan of this episode, but we're going to find some things to talk about positively, but also negatively. But let me know your thoughts overall on this episode, where it ranks for you as far as all 7 episodes so far. So let's break it all down as we jump to the events of Masha's flashback, as we see her daughter being hit by the car, and we see her saying to herself in current timeline, I will be with you soon. And this is where she's interrupted again. There was a lot of interruptions in this episode by different characters. As she's having this moment, Carmel comes running up to her, smacking her in the face, calling her Lillian, confusing her with her ex-husband's new wife. So we always kind of knew Carmel, out of all these 9 perfect strangers, which now the more I think about that title, none of them are really strangers per se, right? We have a family of 3 that know each other. We have a married couple. We have a journalist who probably, if you Google them, you can look them up. Frances, she's a book writer. You can look her up. Tony's an ex-football player. So literally now, just thinking about it, it was always Carmel, right? She's the only one that isn't somewhat famous or has a following or whatever the case would be. So the show really kind of, I guess the big reveal of Carmel wasn't all that surprising to me, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But let me know if you guys were kind of on the same beat now, looking back on it. It was always going to be Carmel. But let's move forward to the Marconis, who are, to be frank, not the best parents, and not just referring to what happened to Zach per se, but just how they're treating Zoe in this whole season, but in particular in this episode, pressuring her to do this treatment. She's she just turned 21. She's an adult. She can make her own decisions, but that pressure that her parents are putting on her in this episode is pretty frustrating for me. But we check in with Carmel at this point, who's fully strapped to a gurney and just is completely going off the rails, or as Jessica says, the wheels on the bus are off now. But we see the rest of the crew hears about Carmel, and this is where we see there were some really weird moments in this episode, as we see, and this is supposed to be a serious moment, right? Everything's going down, and one of the guests is freaking out, but Frances is having a hallucination where she sees Tony actually being a character from her book, which is Fabio, talking about the house and the dog, and obviously this isn't real, so she's just kind of, again, is showing you the effects of the drugs that they're on. But Lars and Marsha, they have several conversations in this episode, and this conversation here is about potentially overdosing Carmel, and he knows what happened to the guest that died last year, and the wife believes that it's the responsibility of Tranquillum as far as her husband, or particularly Marsha is responsible for her death, her husband's death, which I kind of assumed that when we talked about it a couple weeks ago. But it was a lot of frustration in this episode, and this is one of them. Lars is just I know he wants to cover the story, but morally speaking, I know that he's kind of a great character, but it's just he could have put a stop to this very early on, but he's just continuously going along with this stuff. Like, he could have stopped the Marconis that we'll talk about here. There was just a lot of frustration with these characters in this 7th episode, which by this point in the season, I should be like really caring and really emotionally connected to these characters, but I'm just not there. Let me know how you all are feeling about these characters and Lars in this episode. But Masha blames that the husband ate too many cheeseburgers, and that's the reason why he had a heart attack and died. And we see another character interrupting this scene where Frances comes in and she's seeking answers about her feelings for Tony. Is it real? Is it fake? Is it her fear? And another weird scene, they're just looking at each other as Masha, the wheels are off the bus for all the characters. She's just like, are you afraid? And Masha's like, I'm always afraid. And they're just like laughing at each other again. They're all just like, WTF, what's going on with all these characters? But it's the drugs, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do drugs, kids, at home. But Lars and Zoe have a discussion about the misdosing and how real doctors can misdose people, how Zach was given drugs by a doctor that prescribed him for his asthma, but it caused him to, take his own life, this, that, and the other. An interesting conversation, yet again interrupted by a character as Masha comes in and she wants to talk to Zoe. And this is where we get the Marconis and Lars sitting in as he's recording all this stuff. Masha's talking about this new dose that they're going to put them on to go on this, this trip to see their son. It's a mixture of like DMT, LSD, and a few other different medications. And she describes it as like it's going to amplify their senses and they're going to be able to really dive deep into their imagination. But more importantly, they'll be able to see Zach. And again, this is where I'm just frustrated by the Marconis, Napoleon and Heather. Their daughter is very vulnerable right now. She's just celebrating her 21st birthday, where she's been celebrating the past 20 with her twin brother. He's not there, but then they're just like, come on, Zoe, let's do it as a family, Zoe. And of course, I can understand the pressure from Masha, because she obviously is doing this selfishly, but it's just like, come on, man. You guys are her parents. You're supposed to be her, even though she's an adult, you're still her parents and supposed to have her best interest, but they're pushing her to do this drug. It was stupid to me, man. It really was frustrating. But again, it just shows you the desperation, more or less, of these characters to try to make up for their wrongs, and they want to see their son, which to me is just like, that seems worse. That's not going to fix anything. If you're seeing a hallucination of your son, he's not real. So it speaks to the trauma and what that family's going through. But I'm just like, you guys aren't really there for your daughter that is here and present and still alive. So I can see where the story's going. I just don't think it's all written all that perfectly in regards to really hitting that nail on the head. But moving forward, we get a quick little glimpse of Masha's killer, and to me it looked like Method Man, but we reveal who that killer is later in the episode. But at this point, Yao and Delilah are still in conflict as she wants to leave the Tranquillum, and he's like, we can't leave now, which, yeah, I mean, I'm totally with Yao in regards to, yeah, this is some shit that we shouldn't be dealing with, but let's at least help these people out in the meantime. But no, she's like, this is already too dangerous, and her mission is to get away from Tranquillum. But this is supposed to be a serious moment. We have been following these characters the entire season in regards to Tony and Frances. Will they, won't they? Will they have a relationship? Will they move out, and be a couple together? And they're having this conversation, and she goes into how she doesn't want to go on this plank. She doesn't want to dive into this relationship. And Tony's obviously upset by this, and I'm supposed to be, as an audience, and this might just be me, maybe you all feel bad for them, but I could care less. I don't really care for those characters in regards to their relationship, because to me, the development or lack of development of me caring about them as a couple has just been poorly executed. Again, I know some of you all want them to, are shipping them all season, and again, the writing's been on the wall since they first met in the first episode, like, oh, they're going to be a thing, but it's just been poorly executed in regards to, I just don't care about Tony or Frances or, frankly, any of these characters at this point of this season. But we go back to, speaking of don't caring, Mr. and Mrs. I Don't Care, as we check in with Ben and Jessica, and they're having a conversation about renewing their vows, and, she mentions the whole title of the episode, The Wheels on the Bus Are Falling Apart, and I'm convinced at this point in the season, either they're going to die, one of them are going to die, or witness something pivotal, or they are literally the most pointless characters in this. Well, they're already the most pointless characters in the show, but it's like it would be very apparent if nothing happens to them next week. It was just a waste of time whenever we share a screen with them. But I'm assuming next week Jessica or Ben's going to die, or they're going to see something very pivotal to the show, because everything up until this point has been zero development, zero interest on my end. They are so pointless, and whenever we go to them, I could care less. But let's move on. As Lars reveals why he is, I don't know, again, Lars is pissing me off. he should have said this in the room with the Marconis, but he's talking to Masha privately in regards to the last time she upped someone's dosage, they died. And, and I'm just like, and by the way, as I mentioned last week in my review, as you all can see now, I believe Masha, in some way, she thinks she's helping these people. Like, if they're suffering from bipolar, if they're suffering from grief or loss, like she's helping them, but selfishly it's helping her. I think she's using all these people as like test dummies, as, lab rats. We'll see if it fixes them, kudos to them, but it's more or less to fix my trauma, to maybe make me be able to see my daughter. So she's using the Falcones as a way of their grief and their depression of losing a loved one, and particularly losing a son, losing a kid. She lost a kid, and she's using them, kind of exploiting their trauma. Lars pretty much says exactly what I assumed, that she was just doing this for her own gain, that she's using the Marconis to find a way to, let me test on these dummies, and then use this, if it works successfully, to my advantage where I can see my daughter again. So he pretty much lays out what I assumed that my theory was last week. And she's like, no, it's not from her own gain. She assures him that she wants to help them out, but we know it's just for her to be able to see her daughter. But Delilah is packing her bag. She is on her way out of Tranquillum, and she's going to get the police involved. We cut to Masha telling Francis about her daughter's death, and again, this is supposed to be an intimate, more serious, care-filled moment about her daughter, and the only time that she felt like she had purpose or she wasn't selfish is when she was a mom, and she wants to go back to that feeling, which out of the entire episode, that was the most genuine moment of the show, or in this particular episode, because I felt that the way Nicole Kidman delivered that line, and you felt that pain, and you can see, even though it's completely selfish and ridiculous and unethical and just morally speaking terrible what she's doing, but you kind of felt for, at least I did, that I felt like, okay, yeah, she wants to get back to that feeling of being a mother, but it's still obviously a selfish thing of how she's going about doing that. But we see Delilah at this point, she's completely off the rails. The wheels on the bus have coming off of that character. She wants to leave. The gate's not opening up. She's yelling. She's freaking out, but she eventually, which I'm just like, dude, you can hop over this fence, but she eventually pops out of the wooden fence and is on her way to get the cops involved. It's time for the Marconis to get their treatment, and they are changing their mind. They're like, no, we don't want to do this anymore. But then Masha pulls a 180, a Hail Mary per se, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to go on this trip with you guys. And I'm just like, this is so stupid. And Lars is just there like, what are you doing, Masha? It's like, dude, you could have stopped this, hours ago. But she's going to go on this trip with them. We wrap the episode with her taking the drug. Yao is like, dude, this is crazy. The wheels on the bus, wow, I don't know what to do. She's like, listen, keep them, occupied. I'm going to check in with Carmel. I'm going to find you in about 30, 40 minutes. She goes in to check on Carmel, and this is the big moment as Carmel at this point is singing and dancing, packing her bags. She believes, she's talking to Masha. She believes that she should get better treatment from an actual doctor. She says to Masha that, I don't need to be here because it's not safe for me to be around you. And big moment here as we get the cut to the Method Man character that is revealed to have been Carmel. She has her little contacts in her eyes, and it's safe to assume that not only, yes, she shot her many, many, many years ago, which obviously was a stepping stone for Masha to get to this point to be the, who she is and create everything that she's created with Tranquillum. But also, I think it's pretty safe to say that Carmel's been the one that's been texting her this entire time this season regarding the dead, goat's head, you're gonna die, and all that different stuff. And so, yeah, again, it was kind of telegraphed this whole time because, as I mentioned up top, all of the characters aren't necessarily strangers. It's just really one stranger, and it's Carmel. And obviously, Carmel has ties to how Masha almost died, and Lillian, and the ex-husband, and all that stuff. So I'm assuming next week, Masha's and Carmel, she's going to probably keep her captive while Masha's on this psychedelic trip. She's going to probably go back and see her daughter, have a moment there. The Marconis are going to probably see their son and realize that this isn't reality, and they're going to probably try to break out of it. I think by the end of the day, I don't think anyone's going to probably die. If they do, someone's going to be accidentally shot or pushed off a cliff. But by the time, all that kind of happens, I imagine that Delilah is going to probably have the cops come. So we'll see. Maybe next week's finale is going to blow my socks off. But based on this second to last episode, I expect to probably be disappointed. But I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to keep the energy high and the hopes high. But hey, that's just my thoughts on the seventh episode. Wasn't all that impressed. The only moment I thought was genuine was when Masha was talking about being a mother. But outside of that, everything else felt incomplete, felt rushed, and felt like they were just running to the finish line. But hey, let me know your thoughts on the seventh episode. If you enjoyed it, I'm glad you did. Let me know your positives, but also if you're more like me and thought it was more kind of lackadaisical, lackluster per se, let me know your thoughts on that. And of course, your thoughts, your theories, and your predictions of what you hope to see in next week's finale. Let's talk about it in the comment section. If you stuck around to this point in this review, I appreciate every single one of you all for all the reviews that you've been supporting so far. I appreciate you. Make sure before you leave to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell. That way you don't miss any of my other future content. As you can see on the screen now, subscribe to the channel. Check out my other content, my other playlists. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe. We'll see you on the next video.